Hello to this video. Here I will try to provide evidence against, um, in his own words, verbal diarrhea about nationalism and place of UK as a superior culture to others in the world. That to me reflects lack of knowledge of other cultures. I don't know how much time um, Mr. Edwards has spent traveling around the world, most importantly, reading about the world. But I think that his statements are highly subjective. It's great that to love your community, country. Uh, I love many things about England. I love particularly Scotland. I wish I knew more about Ireland, but I'm very sympathetic to its history, and same with Wales. For example, personally, I had an English girlfriend around Leeds. She lived in these cottages and small old warehouses that none of them had two floors, and everything was green. The roads were small. It was fantastic. It's a small paradise, and you can see something about that where Mr. Edwards, our favorite drummer, Prague, uh, in my view, he should play jazz rock because he's very good. Um, um, Leaves, right? You can see the beauty of the scene. And definitely, I've been very influenced by British music, which I love, as millions of people around the world, Britain being one of the most creative areas in terms of musical production and innovation. Now, regarding the superiority of the English culture, as much as one can be sympathetic, I have many doubts about that. And equating left-wing politics, that is egalitarian or equity type of politics, with relativism is impossible. I mean, if one thing is the tradition of either socialist, anarchist, or communist families of the left, or social democracy included within socialism as part of this very broad family, relativism doesn't match this tradition. The opposite is true. The Marxian tradition being the tradition that is in the social sciences and developed with the social sciences having a lot of evidence of its influence and empirical studies, is materialist and realist in its ontology and epistemology. It's definitely not relativist. all these postmodernist Derrida and all these um, writings, this has nothing to do with the left. Neither has identity politics. If people pretend to belong to the tradition of socialism, anarchism, communism, and all their families, and including social democracy, none of them has the foundation in relativism. Relativism is linked to subjectivism, to even anti-science, right? So, starting from this clarification of what the accusations of relativism of the left, which is a pattern in Mr. Edwards. Constantly, he characterizes the left as subjectivist, postmodernist, identity politics, and it's precisely the opposite. Somebody coming from the socialist, anarchist, or even communist, or at the other end, social democratic tradition would reject this type of thinking. Actually, is degradation of that tradition if people who endorse identity politics claim to be on the left spectrum, on the egalitarian traditions. So, to come back to England and the UK, it's great to love one's nation, country, place, community. I myself prefer Barcelona in the world cities, but in the world as a whole, subjectivist appraisal would have Paris as the preferred country, which is romanticized for its elegance, coffee culture, style. It has been popularized with movies as a unique place. And I would be among those, at least. I don't know the current Paris, but the Paris of the 80s that I saw, or even because I was raised in a French school, and I was there in the 70s when I was a kid. I love the place. Then there is New Orleans, precisely because of the multiculturalism, the jazz. Bangkok is another country that's a city that's very loved by foreigners for the vibe of rushed, chaotic way of living and culture. Then would come a place like Seville in Spain, which of course has flamenco and tapas and the southern culture of Andalusia, which is Al-Andalus, that has a flavor of still of the Islamic past, which people tend to love. And Reykjavik in Iceland too is very popular. Oaxaca in Mexico, which is the colors, the fruits, the mezcal makes me think about Under the Volcano, which is not so positive, but or Kyoto, Japan, for the beauty, or Marrakesh, or Lisbon. Uh, it's a melancholic kind of decadent feeling that people love. And even Queenstown, New Zealand is a high ranking city, right? Um, which the mountains, lakes, and are very appealing to tourists, which value emotional resonance, cultural authenticity of the city, and the vibe, so to say. In terms of, yes, global city rankings, my own city, Barcelona, also ranks high in the various rankings of for living, for example, number 8 in 2023 in the world's best cities ranking by Resonance Consultancy. The brand of the city of Barcelona is very strong. Appeared number 8 in the ninth in 2021 in the touristic attractiveness, and very high in sustainable development goals. Second in 2025, because of the effort in environmental initiatives, which I'm quite critical of, but they are real. It's just that they increase inequality because locals cannot afford these areas, and international gentrification tends to occur. In the places where I grew up, it's kind of sad, but anyway, then is a very AI oriented. Now this tends to be valued, and it's ranking very high also in these type of rankings. So in in cultural interaction, student life, and for example, potential for the future, Barcelona tends to rank high. So basically, these are questions of culture and creativity and tourism. Of course, in overall in questions of economics, New York and London rank at the top. So that's already one thing, that the English culture is not the most valued in the world. It depends, at least, in what area. But precisely in the cultural area, that is the one that Mr. Stewart values, it doesn't rank at the top. It's more a global economic city. it's rich people that love London and can afford it internationally, I would say. And has this mystique of a city of where a lot of economic transactions at the highest level occur, investments, etc. So now I'll shift to another claim of Mr. Stewart, anti-left-wing speech. So he claimed that the British culture is the first to have discovered, institutionalized, created a culture of tolerance. That's not true, absolutely. And there is a lot of evidence. Political tolerance and democratic institutions emerged in many cultures throughout history before in England, often due to challenges of governance, fight against tyranny, trade needs, and social pluralism, like the multiculturalism that Mr. Edwards dislikes so much. So I will give you some historical examples of countries that had institutions that were proto-democratic or pre-democratic or tolerant before the UK. My own city, for example, Barcelona, had the Consell de Cent. Depending on who you talk to, in the 11th or definitely 13th century, around 1249, in the middle of the 13th century, under the king Jaume I. It established a council of the 100 that represented the interest of the nobles, but also of the small artisans and merchants. So they all had the same right to vote, and it resolved the disputes before engaging in, say, civil war or rebellions. That included tolerance mechanisms like representations, a legal framework, the usages, which is started in the 11th century, and that codified laws that balance feudal and urban interests, and that fostered a rule-based conflict resolution system that was democratic and tolerant, and reduced the violence of the opposing interest between these feudal social classes, or diverse, because the urban social classes were diverse. I won't get into that. But on one side, you had the feudal lords, and on the other, the representatives of the urban social classes. Then trade and openness, El Consolat del Mar in 1200 also regulate maritime trade, requiring tolerance of diverse merchants and legal systems from other countries and their cultures. So that's another characteristic. And it ended with the takeover of Spain, of the Catalonian kingdom, after the law of secession, I think in the 18th century, yes. So the legacy has influenced the Catalan self-governance style, which is strong in assemblies, and also anarchism was very popular, and that was universally acknowledged in Homage to Catalonia by George Orwell. So here we go. George Orwell praised Catalonian left. So in classical Athens before, and I would never claim that Catalonia was the first to have these institutions, because obviously classical Athens in the 5th or 4th centuries before Christ already had democratic institutions. The Athenian ecclesia or assembly, and the bulle, the council, allowed citizens to vote on laws through, but it excluded women and slaves. That's definitely a flaw that lasted until the 20th century in many places that adopted democratic institutions. So, or 19th century for slavery. But then in slavery, today we have more slaves than ever in the history of humankind. So it still exists. That in Athens, there was a culture of tolerance in the debates, and philosophical schools like that of the sophist favored that, even if they killed Socrates. But that culture of tolerance was strongly established basically 5 centuries before the Christian era. Then there was the Republican Rome that was less democratic than the Greek institutions, but it had the mixed governance. The Senate and the tribunes balanced patrician and plebeian interest through systems that were not completely democratic, but had some elements of it. And it included legal tolerance of different views. The Lex Hortensia of the 3rd century before Christ granted plebeians equal legislative power, institutionalizing this compromise. So then we had the Islamic Caliphate, yes, Islamic, in the 8th century. That's after the Republican Rome, which was 5. It was in the 500 years before the Christian era. The Islamic Caliphate starting having democratic institutions on the 8th century until the 13th century. For example, the dhimmi system, where Muslims rule Jews and Christians, were tolerated as protected minorities with some restrictions that happened in Spain, for example, when they conquered parts of Spain. In particular, in Cordoba, in this caliphate called Al-Andalus, which name has been retained for an autonomous region in the south of Spain called Andalusia. So this Al-Andalus tolerated interfaith dialogue among Muslims, Christians, and Jews. And there was a lot of scholarly exchange. Of course, when the with the conquest of Castile, of the different kingdoms of Spain, including Al-Andalus, unified the country at the end of the 15th century. These institutions were abolished. Many Catalan were not abolished until the 18th century because the relation between the Kingdom of Catalonia, Aragon, and Castile was different. It was in the later on that the Catalan institutions were eliminated and Spain took over. But with Al-Andalus, it was around the 13th century already. Then we had the Italian city-states of from the 11th to the 15th century, that the Venetian Greek Council of Florence also had its guilds, and a great variety of indigenous peoples in the Americas that the anthropologist, anarchist, British Graeber, one of the persons that was behind the movement of the 1% after the capitalist world crisis of 2008, stressed in his great book, The Dawn of Everything, which is co-written with a colleague of his, whose name I cannot remember. But there are examples of, for example, the Iroquois Confederacy, in which land I am thanks to the British invasion. Of course, they were obliterated, but they had a participatory democracy with consensus-based decision-making among tribes. That's politically very advanced. And of course, I don't know examples from Asia or Oceania or south of Central America or Africa. There probably could be same experience, but that's a pre-invasion from of the Americas by the Spaniards. They already had this participatory democracy. That's incredible. So this evidence saying that the UK invented tolerance I don't understand what it means, and I don't know. Frankly, it feels very insular and ethnocentric, and I wouldn't do. In a previous video, I already showed sources of British empire slaughter of about 150 million people around the world. And I myself would ask for forgiveness or reparations or give reparations. I mean, um, I don't understand how one can be so convinced of the superiority of a culture that's so violent. Even if you love elements, you have to recognize also the dark side. The countries are contradictory, like individuals. There are things that you may consider universally good and others that are bad for others. So the common themes, like it happens in social sciences, in these political tolerant institutions, come often from demands of trade, for example, economics, trade and urbanization for the coastal cities like Venice or the Barcelona itself, right? The exchanges with multiple countries with different cultures and legal systems help develop tolerance. Also, the use of legal codes, like I described the councils, like the Conseil de Seine. Then elite bargaining between different classes, nobility, merchants, or artisans can be another element to develop institutions. Then the cultural exchange, like learning, centers of learning, like Cordoba in Athens, Al-Andalus, Athens, are tied to tolerance through intellectual growth. So that's the evidence that I can provide, and there is much more literature in of course, anthropology, history of political science, sociological history, legal studies, of this issue. That's with regard to the trust and tolerance and having a democratic attitude towards different points of view. Now I'll move to the issue of slavery and Britain. I mean, frankly, in this area, I would be very careful to claim that Britain is a leader in the ending of slavery. I mean, I really don't understand where does this come from. France, even there is a lot of contradictions, or if you want, quote unquote, hypocrisy in countries in this issue. Before the 19th century, France declared already with through its king that he abolished slavery in the mainland, although not in the colonies. That was in the 1315. That's a long time before England. Then Portugal in 1781 abolished also in the mainland of Portugal, but of course not in Brazil. And Vermont, which has the tradition to be the most left-wing state in the US, at least during the some of the decades of the second part of the 20th century. Actually, that's the place where the senator, the only socialist senator in the US, Bernie Sanders, comes from. He's a senator for Vermont. Was the first state to abolish slavery constitutionally in 1777. So we have to give a leadership to the United States. Then there was the abolitions later in the 19th century that more generalized. In Denmark and Norway was in 1803. Britain started in 1807 and 1833 when it really limited or abolished slavery. It banned a slave trade in 1807, but only trade. It abolished slavery in its empire in 1833. It was effective in 1834. So 1884 is when Britain abolished slavery, but promoted it in the US. So it was not real. France, very close, in 1848, the Second Republic abolished slavery. In the United States, it was 1865. There was the 13th Amendment to the Constitution after a lot of debates. And in Brazil, it was in 1888. It was the last country of the Americas, to abolish slavery. But the real global abolitions continue, have not been achieved. Even if countries abolish slavery, it exists in many countries of the world, even in the United States, with migrants in Florida from Haiti, for example, migrant workers. So I'm not saying it's massive, but overall in the world, there are more millions of slaves today than ever earlier in history. Notable cases in the 20th century are Saudi Arabia and Yemen, which in 1962 abolished chattel slavery under international pressure. And Mauritania in 1981, 1881. So it was the last country officially to ban slavery, although the enforcement has never been very strong. Mauritania, 81. So Britain had a dual role in the abolition of slavery. It compensated the slave traders with about 20 million pounds, which was a huge sum in the 1834 or a little bit later. But this post 1807, as I mentioned, was full of loopholes, and we cannot say that it really abolished the slavery, because it banned its own slave trade, but continued to profit by financing and ensuring that there were a slave trade through other countries, basically with ships with other flags, that being Portuguese, Brazilian, or Spanish. And that continued through the 19th century. The industrial demand for British factories of slave grown cotton continued from the US and Brazil until the 1860s. So one can say that Britain continued with the slave trade until the 1860s. Definitely not the leader worldwide in abolishing slavery. And probably the country that benefited the most also, given the extent of its empire. There were the colonial exceptions of India and Africa. So slavery persisted in India until 1843, and in Africa, for example, in Nigeria, until the 20th century. I forgot that, 1901. So, oh my God, how can you say that Britain is a leader country in anti-slavery? I mean, what can I say? And be so convinced and saying it today in 2025. If that's not right wing, is lack of information, or both. It kind of whitewashes one of the most horrendous forms of inequality, maybe the worst. I'm not surprised that people write saying that Mr. Edwards is right-wing, because errors of that magnitude imply that the whitewashing of the crimes of the major empire that the world has seen in terms of extent of the appropriation of other countries, peoples, cultures, terrain, geography, and potentially goods, if not surpassed probably by the US. But the diplomatic and economic leverage that the anti-slavery squadron of the of the 19th century, what did is the Royal Navy intercepted slave ships, but resold confiscated vessels to slavers. And the compensation to slaveholders, as I mentioned, was huge. 20 million pounds paid to British slave owners, which could be equivalent to 1.5 billion pounds today. And slaves received nothing. 0.0000000. So if you want to look at literature, it started, well, classics are Eric Williams in Capitalism and Slavery, that's 1944. It argues that Britain abolished slavery only when it became economically obsolete, when the capitalist labor market was so developed, slavery was a problem. And parliamentary records between 1807 and 1860 reveal all the debates and on reducing tariffs for slave-grown sugar, and that undermined abolitionist efforts. There is also a great book, Sweetness and Power. And of course, that's a classic, but there is a lot of literature after that, like Marika Sherwood's After Abolition in 2007, that exposes Britain's continuing financial ties to global slavery, in particular in Latin America, in Brazil, in Cuban plantations until the 20th century. Well, 20th century in Africa, 1901. Well, that's the leader in anti-slavery. There were paradoxes in this history, like 80, the 1804 rebellion, the first anti-colonial successful rebellion led by blacks, which Europeans never forgave, Toussaint Louverture and others. That's the only slave rebellion that has led to independence. Yet Britain refused to recognize Haiti until 1825 and demanded reparations. France was much worse, but England had a similar policy. And Britain promoted palm oil trade in West Africa as an alternative to slavery, yet its merchants profited from both. That's the idea of legitimate commerce. So you can check the Slavery Abolition Act of 1833 or the British Empire's role in ending slavery as additional literature. But, well, if I did, I'm sure that there are modern studies after 2007, but I gave you the one, so you can follow after that. So Mr. Stewart is wrong in everything, in his claim of the superiority of the British culture in terms of introducing tolerance, democracy, and then in the leadership in the anti-slavery globally. And well, it's kind of it's sad to hear that from and attacking the left on top. And this misrepresentation of what the left, the egalitarian traditions is very unfair, because subjectivism, relativism, postmodernism, for example, in the book by David Harvey, who's English, the culture of postmodernity in 1989 already shows the intellectual bankruptcy of postmodernism. And it was popular in part because it's easy, because it was didn't require any action or involvement in any struggle. It was conservatism for persons who didn't want to appear conservative, but yet were not really egalitarian, in my opinion, or had interested in the status quo. That's a class determinism of culture. It's very anti-Marxist, actually. No, or the opposite. Now, well, I reject this idea of superstructure and structure, and this is a dualist philosophy. I mean, culture can influence politics and economics, and economics can influence culture, and politics can be influenced by culture as well. You know, a realist approach doesn't put culture, politics, or economics above or under the other in terms of influence. It depends on the specific historical example that we are analyzing. So that's it. That was not very fun, but my job is, if you find something that I think is wrong, to expose it. And it doesn't mean that under the banner of egalitarian ideologies, such as socialism or anarchism or communism, there could not have atrocities. It depends on the specific government, and the same way that we don't take democracy for granted when a country calls itself democrat is what a country does specifically that counts, not the label that they give themselves for specific reasons. Think that, for example, the Soviet Union had an interest in calling itself socialist, because the early developments of the revolution of 1917 were true in achieving more equality. And also during several decades, there was a great growth. However, in spite of the two world wars that were devastating, 28 million dead in the Second World War, and the Soviet Union was the real winner over Hitler. So they had an interest in keeping themselves calling socialist because that was popular, although they weren't. And that led them to the demise. I won't go into the criticism, but and during the Cold War, the other camp was interested in calling them socialist to discredit the ideology. So, in other words, what a country calls itself, or even a party, is just strategic, or can be strategic, or has different reasons. But what's important is what kind of politics are followed by the specific party. So when Andy attacks the New Labour as the left, what he does is discrediting egalitarian policies, because the New Labour is not left. It has lost that contact with the British working class that is so well described by E.P. Thompson. But on the other hand, the right wing is interested in keeping calling left-wing New Labour, because it discredits labor, or the tradition that was so popular, and due to the advantages of the Attlee administration, which, yes, had Fabians, but also had socialists. And in the administration and the party, such as I think Lasky, if I don't, well, forgive me if I don't pronounce the name correctly. So thank you for listening, and I hope that was helpful in some way. Thank you.